VTC 6HT 82870. Twenty. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3.
Well, I've come to the last of my 6 lectures, and this one is going to be rather different. You see, the first 5, I tried to unfold a story. If you remember, we were putting together the pieces of a jigsaw puzzle as far as the jigsaw puzzle had been completed to the present time. Well, now I want to talk about the future. And I can't talk about the future. I can't tell you a story about the future, can I? Because it doesn't exist yet. But what I am going to do is talk about some of the new pieces, one might say, of the jigsaw puzzle that are being discovered, some of the pieces that you, in your turn, will be piecing together. Well, now, do you remember in the first lecture we had a look at that wonderful picture of Neil Armstrong landing on the moon? I think it's fitting, perhaps, that we have a look at some pictures from the recent Apollo 17 mission to start this lecture. Let's have a look at those Apollo 17 pictures.
Probably one of the most significant things we can think about when we think about Apollo is that it has opened for us being the world, a challenge of the future. The door is now cracked, but the promise of that future lies in the young people, not just in America, but the young people all over the world, learning to live and learning to work together.
The young people all over the world learning to live, learning to work together. You noticed how much those pictures were an improvement on the original ones. It just shows how in such a short space of time, in 3.5 years, the technology's improved so that we now had much clearer pictures, good color, and quite good sound. Well, now, I've been told to talk to somebody on the other end of this telephone, and this isn't a gimmick this time. There is somebody there. You remember in my last lecture we had a bit of fun, but I'm going to pick up the telephone. Hello?
Hello?
Who is there?
This is Lou Davies here from Sydney.
Professor Davis from Sydney.
Correct.
Well, Professor Davis.
Geoffrey Gurrier.
It's Geoffrey Gurrier from the Royal Institution.
Well, good morning, Geoffrey, and good morning to all of you in London.
Very nice. Good morning. Now, we noticed you said good morning. I've got a globe here, and the light is shining on our side of it, and I can see you're completely in the dark. How good of you it was to get up in the middle of the night for us.
Not at all.
Well, this is great. It's a great thing to talk to you. Now, I've got someone here who is studying physics, and it's a young lady, Claire, and she'd love to ask you a question. I'm going to pass you over to her.
Thank you.
Hello, Professor.
Good morning, Claire.
May I ask you a question?
Please do.
Well, in these lectures, Mr. Gurrier has been showing us a lot of electrical equipment which used to be very big and clumsy, but now it's much smaller. And he was saying how integrated circuits can be made on pinheads. So, do you think it would be possible to make a computer comparable to a human brain?
Well, that's a very interesting and fascinating question, to which I suppose the answer is both yes and no. First of all, in speed and accuracy,
calculation. I think computers made with integrated circuits could already win hands down against the human brain.
Yes.
Inability to remember without ever forgetting. Perhaps they could, the computer would win too. But in capacity of memory, that is the amount of information which can be stored, then I think the human brain is well in front.
Yes.
And there's a real challenge there for any budding young scientist in the audience in London, such as yourself, because I think that the really scientists have no complete understanding at all, so far as I'm aware, of the mechanism by which the human brain is able to store so much more information and so much more compactly than one is able to do the job with integrated circuits.
Yes, well, thank you very much. Here's Mr. Goyer.
Well, hello, Professor Davies, thank you very much for that interesting reply. Now, I don't know exactly who else is listening to us, but I believe that Professor Morrison is listening, and possibly Sir George Porter, I don't know.
George Porter's here.
Sir George Porter,
I'm here, yes.
am I speaking to you?
Sorry, eh?
It is indeed. Sir George Porter, what a thrill it is for us to be speaking to you. You were here with us only 2 days ago. Where are you now?
Yes, I was at your fourth lecture, and I'm very sorry to be missing this one. I'm now in Chandigarh in India, which is just at the foot of the Himalayas in the Punjab.
You are indeed, and I'm sure the young people here would be very interested to know what you're doing there.
Well, this is a meeting at the University of Chandigarh of the Indian Science Congress. It's a rather special meeting because it's the 60th anniversary, the Diamond Jubilee, and there are 4,000 scientists here celebrating and having lectures and telling each other about what they're doing.
I say, how interesting. Well, Sir George, there's somebody here who would like to ask you a question. This young man's interested in genetics. Can I hand him over? Yeah.
Yes?
Give your name.
This is Louis speaking. Do you think you could possibly give any idea as to the possible events that might evolve from the future of genetics and what might happen?
I got the genetics, I didn't get the other bit. A lot of waves ripples in the ether tonight, I'm afraid. Could you repeat it?
Could you give any idea as to the future discoveries in the science of genetics?
In the science of genetics?
Yeah.
Well, of course, this is one of the most rapidly changing and developing sciences of all. And the most exciting things are at the molecular level, aren't they? The discovery of exactly how the genetic code works and how the information is transmitted. Just how that will develop, I would find it very hard to say, because like a lot of science, which is moving very fast.
I'm afraid I'll have to ring you off.
Hello, Sir George. We're sorry to stop you in the middle of an answer. This was most interesting. We're back again now. The young people here would just like to say one thing. They all know of you. They know of you as the director of the institution here, and I'm going to ask them to give 3 cheers for Sir George Porter. Just 1 cheer. Say, hip, hip. Yay! Now, did you hear that, Sir George?
I heard it came through loud and clear. My best wishes to all of the Royal Institution.
Well, I'll say goodbye. Now, I believe Professor Morrison has been listening to us.
Yes, I have.
You have, Professor Morrison?
Quite exciting.
It is exciting, isn't it, to have this conference around the world? Well, now, look, I have someone here who I think you know, and I'm going to hand the telephone straight over because he wants to ask you a question.
Hello, Professor Morrison.
Hello, Jonathan.
Yes, this is Jonathan here.
Oh, how are you?
Okay, thank you.
Very good.
Can I ask you a question, please? We've heard that the Americans are trying to receive space signals. Could you please tell us about this?
Well, it was some time ago, in fact. They did try from Green Bank, West Virginia, but haven't done much lately. And in fact, our friends, the Soviet-Russian astronomers, have done more lately. In the last couple of 3 years, they've tried a few more times. But it's all just beginning. One will have to listen to, I don't know, 500,000 or 1 million places before we can have a good search. And so far, we've only listened perhaps to 24. So there's a long way to go, and nobody has done it yet really determinedly and seriously. That will come, but not yet quite.
Thank you very much.
Well, Professor Morrison, this is Geoffrey Gurrier again. May I say once more how grateful I am to all of you, 3 of you, for talking to us here. We were all very excited about this. I'm just going to ask the children once more to say one rousing cheer to our professors. Hip hip. Well, I'll say goodbye and a very happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you. Thank you very much, everyone.
Goodbye.
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 Well, that's a pretty wonderful thing, isn't it? We had that telephone conversation with these 3 great men, Australia, Boston, Massachusetts, and Sydney, Australia. And those signals were being bounced off a satellite. And just let us remind ourselves, I've just got a piece of tape here, which will show us the position of a satellite in respect to the Earth. You know, we call them a geostationary satellite. Well, it's very roughly about the circumference of the Earth away, 22,000 miles away, and we're up there, actually. It doesn't matter where I hold it, but you may appreciate, just to get the word geostationary right, if I put something in orbit round the Earth, it's going to take 1.5 hours to go round if it's right on the surface. And you know the Moon, which is 10 times as far away in this scale as this piece of tape, how long does the Moon take to go round? 28 days, that's right. Well, somewhere in between 1.5 hours and 28 days is 24 hours. And if we can get a satellite at that distance, 22,000 miles, it will follow around the equator, and that's why we call it geostationary. It isn't stationary, but it's stationary with respect to our geography. And that's where the satellite was, and those were the signals that we heard bouncing off the satellite. Now, I told you in this lecture I'm going to be hopping from one subject to another. I'm going to come straight away from this aspect to a possibility of domestic broadcasting by satellite. And for this, I'll have to show you quite quickly. I'm going to run through some of these things very quickly because there's a lot to show you in a short time. This is merely showing you a possibility that you can have a satellite, a geostationary satellite, and send a signal up to it rather than directly into people's homes. This is a possibility, and the satellite can then broadcast, and it can cover the whole of a country. A beam, 1 degree beam is sufficient to cover the United Kingdom. So we could have a complete television service covering the whole country from one satellite, as opposed to all these terrestrial or ground transmitters that we have. The scheme is this. We have a dish this end which is sending the signal up to the satellite. Here's the satellite, there's the receiving dish. It transmits from this one and is picked up on the roof of the house. Now, just to have a look at that a little more in close-up, there is the transmitting dish. The signal goes up, and now you can see the receiving dish there on the satellite, the transmitting dish there, and the receiving dish on a house which is very nearly as big as the television receiver, which is rather interesting, isn't it? It's just a model, of course. What I want to show you, that just seems to want a little tuning, that receiver reception. I don't know if it's the satellite gentleman there, because he's the one that's very good at doing this. What I really wanted to show you is that if that is just brought into lock, that this is a genuine transmission, and the frequency we're using from the satellite to the receiver is 12 gigahertz. That's 12,000 million hertz, which is a very high frequency. And you may be interested to know that although it's a long way away, the satellite, you don't lose energy in empty space. The reason the signal normally gets weaker is because it's spreading out and it's on the surface of a sphere which is getting bigger and bigger. But if we send it down a very narrow angle, then we don't lose energy. And I'm now going to turn the beam away, and you see if I turn it well away, it's got such a, we're so close, it's a strong signal. There you are. And I can beam it back, and that's the signal. And indeed, if I just put my hand this end, you see I can interrupt it there. That's a genuine transmission at that sort of frequency. Well, now I'm going to hop on to a totally different subject, and this is transmitting signals by light. You remember we started off in the first lecture with optical transmission, and it was the cadets looking through a telescope at Nelson's message. Well, we can still use light, and of course that developed into the heliograph where you could send Morse code by light, but you can also send light modulated with speech, and this is a modern device. If I switch it on, you will see it lights up. You see that? And I'm going to ask our friend here to take the other end of the system, and this is equipped with a telescope, and I can look through the telescope, and when he gets to the top of the stairs, if we're both very careful and aim our light beams at each other, I think you'll be able to see we can talk to each other. So I'll switch it on. We'll aim our light beams right. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clearly.
That's very good. And we can hear you? Yes, that's fine. If I turn my beam away, you can't hear me? Other than direct. Well, we can actually hear you. Thank you very much. That's how it's used. Well, fine. We'll just put those down. Thank you. Well, now, that was actually modulating a light beam. I'm now going to show you a much more exciting way of doing it than that. In fact, that would just carry speech. We'll carry it quite a distance. But what I'm going to talk about now is actually sending a color television signal at these very, very high frequencies, these optical frequencies. Now, as the ether gets gradually filled up with free space waves, you know, we talked about this crowding of the ether, we may want to confine our signals to pipes. Or you remember that wave guide through which we put the centimeter waves? Have any of you any idea what the wave guide would look like that was going to carry a light signal? What would you expect it to look like? What? A glass rod, that's absolutely right. You may have seen some of these edge-lit advertisements where you shine the light up through the glass and the glass is trapped. Well, I'm going to now show you a glass fiber. And this fiber, I'll show you this view at first. This is just a picture of it, and I'll show you the size of it later. It's actually filled with liquid. That's a glass tube filled with liquid. Now, when I show you the size of it, you may be surprised that it is filled with liquid, because if I just remove this, it's very delicate. That is the fiber. It's about twice the diameter of a human hair, and it requires a pressure of about 10,000 pounds per square inch to get the liquid into it. Do you remember when I was showing you the laser beam bending, we had some glycerine in the bottom of a tank and water on top, and I said that the beam was slowed up through the glycerine because it had a higher refractive index, was the correct word, but it was a medium which was optically more dense. Well, the reason that fiber is filled with liquid is because we want the wave to tend to travel down the center more slowly, so that the outsides, it's always folding in on itself, and that's the way it gets trapped in there. Now, this is the equipment which is quite remarkable and has been developed at Southampton University. At this end, we have a signal, a television signal, a color signal, which is going along this cable into this little box here, and it's modulating a little light source. It's called a light-emitting diode, and I'll come back to that later. That's just another way of producing light electrically. And the light is traveling down this fiber, you can just see it, into this drum, and there's a kilometer's worth of fiber there. It's coming off the other end into this little detector here. It's being reconverted to electricity. and you are seeing the picture actually being transmitted through this glass fibre. Can you see that? If I take a card or a piece of paper, I may be able to interrupt it and prove the point. Yes. You see, that was interrupting the light beam. Can you see there's a dark band? You can see the dark band there on the right-hand side. That is because the picture, in going through this fibre, is being delayed by about 3.5 microseconds. Now, this is actually being broadcast in colour, and it's the first time that a colour television signal has been put through an optical fibre and broadcast. I'll do that again to show there's no trick. That is genuinely the light going through the fibre. That's... Well, that's a world first. Now, hopping on to a completely different field, I'm now going to telephone a colleague of mine, and he happens to be the Director of Research of the Post Office. And with a bit of luck, I'll be able to telephone him here. I'll have a go anyway. I'll switch it on, and you can hear the noise. And I'm now going to dial. You can hear it. He's answered, "Hello, Professor Bray."
Hello, Geoffrey. How good to see you as well as hear you.
Well, isn't it remarkable? Now, this is a surprise, you see. I pick up a telephone and now I see you sitting there. Professor Bray, look, we're going to want to talk to you a little more about this remarkable thing, the video phone. But I've just been talking about fibre optics, and I think that you at Dollis Hill are rather interested in fibre optics too. Am I right?
We are indeed, Geoffrey. I shouldn't be surprised one day, you know, to see these viewphone pictures coming into people's homes through a glass fibre. And not only that, of course, providing them with telephone communication and vision communication as well.
How very interesting. Well, now, look, this, somebody here, I think, would like to ask you a question. Yes, here we are. Now, if I press this button self-view, I believe, I can see myself, and with a bit of luck, I'm going to see you too, so I'm going to try it. Now, you come down. Oh, there we can see each other. Yeah, and you can still see us?
Yes, I can see you fine.
Well, isn't that remarkable? Now, you ask a question. We'll go back to Professor Bray. You ask, what was your question? Oh, yes, you want the phone, don't you? Of course.
Hello, sir.
Hello, Matthew.
Can you tell me when these video phones will be in our homes?
Well, the one we're using now, Matthew, is quite an experimental one, and it'll take a few years to turn this into a device which is low enough in cost for people to use on a large scale. But it will not be many years, I think, before a viewphone will come into service.
And how much will it cost?
Well, that's rather a difficult question at this stage. Clearly, it's got to be a cost that people can afford in terms of the service the viewphone will provide.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew.
Well, thank you very much, John. A couple of very awkward questions when a thing's right in the research phase.
It is in the research phase,
yes.
As you say, Geoffrey, but there are many developments of viewphone that I think will interest people. We expect it to be able to provide clear, high-definition copies of documents, for example, and by pressing a button to get a printed copy when you want it.
How very useful.
For business people, you see, as well as people in the home, I think this is going to be a very important communication tool of the future.
How valuable. Just one point, of course, you're not using a handset, and I am. I'm doing it because I'm wearing a microphone as well, which would cause a bit of trouble, but you can use either, and I could have used this microphone. I'm just telling them that because it's rather interesting. You see, you're not using one.
Yes, that's the loud-speaking telephone.
That's right.
It's part of the viewphone.
Well, I'm going to say thank you very much, John, for talking to us, and hang up. Goodbye.
Thank you, Geoffrey. Goodbye.
Switch it off. Well, there is a telephone of the future. How interesting to be able to ring up your friends. You'll never be able, you know, if you do that, to tell those white lies like you can over a telephone when they can't see you, will you? We're coming on now to another interesting development, and this all concerns the question of being able to record at these very, very high speeds. Again, you know, you'll be tired of my mentioning this figure, but I keep on talking about 11 million picture elements every second have to be transmitted. And if you take an ordinary magnetic tape recorder, it can't handle anything like information at this speed. So here we have a very, very special recorder which is able to record color television off air. And we have a color television receiver here, and I'm first of all going to show you that it is an ordinary domestic color television receiver. There's BBC One, fine. I'll go straight over. There's ITV, okay, and again BBC Two. And there we are on BBC Two. Well, now, I'm going to leave it on BBC Two for a minute, and I want you to imagine that this is a program that I want to watch now, you see, but also on the other side, I mean, this may be something, you know, my favorite Doctor Who or something, but I don't want to miss that cup tie, you see, which is coming on. So while I'm watching this, I want to be able to record what's happening on BBC One. And this is the device on which I can do it. Now, first of all, I can eject the cartridge, pull it out, and I think you can see there that that is like an ordinary magnetic tape. It's a little bit wider, but it's a cartridge, not dissimilar to the sort we use for sound recording. Put it back, push it down, and now I'll switch on, and I have to do this, that's right. I'm going to now record by pressing the two buttons at a time, like we do on most recorders. Push them well down. Oh. I'm just working from an awkward angle there. And while it's working, just for a few minutes, we'll just record a little bit. Remember that what it's recording is not this, it's recording BBC One. There we are, somebody talking, BBC One. I'll go back, BBC Two. If it didn't crop up at the same time, you may want to set this clock so that it would automatically record at the right time. Now, I won't waste any more time. I'll just assume now that we've recorded the program that we want to record, and I'll switch this off, and I'll run it back. That should probably be enough. It stopped. And now run it forward, and I think that was just a second. I'm going for, now I've just got to do one more thing. It was recording on this button, and there we are. You recognize the gentleman, do you? That's the one we saw just now. That is actually what we recorded. Fine? That is the recording. Good? Switch it off. Well, that in itself is a very remarkable achievement, isn't it? To be able to put color television on tape. I'm going to show you something which I think is even more remarkable. It is more in the research stage than that, and I think we've been very privileged here. But let me first of all remind you that you did see this ordinary gramophone record that had recorded Baird's 30-line television 45 years ago. And you remember I said to you, it's taken us 45 years to get to the stage where we could record television on a disc. Well, this has now been achieved, and first of all, I'll just explain to you very briefly. I won't go into any great detail, but let me see if I can show you these pictures and explain roughly how it works. I'll make sure the camera's getting a good view from there, yes. Well, what it is a plastic disc, and the message is going to be imprinted on it by a laser beam process. Now, a laser beam, as you know, is a rather remarkable beam, and one of the characteristics is it can be focused to a very fine point indeed. Now, here is the laser tube, the tube that's generating the laser beam. And the beam is being formed here. It's going through prisms, blocks, which turn it through a right angle, bring it over to here, and finally up and focused onto this disc. Now, if we imagine this being the replay disc, which I'm going to show you, that beam is doing the same thing that an ordinary gramophone stylus would do, only it's not in contact with the disc. That's one of the wonderful things about it, so there's no wear. And it's reading off the pattern that has been recorded on the disc. But let me just show you some of the dimensions. You see these little dashes here? Well, this is what it's actually recording. And the indentations, the depth of the indentations on the disc is less than the wavelength of light. We're now talking about 0.1 of a millionth of a meter, 0.1 mu. And the distance between these successive tracks, these are tracks running along the record that way. If you can imagine, this is a big disc round here, of course. This is very highly magnified. This distance is about 2 mu, 2 millionths of a meter. That's on the outside of the disc, and it's less by the time you get to the inside when, I'm sorry, these distances are that. They get less as you get to the inside because, of course, the circles are smaller on the inside. So we're dealing with some very, very remarkable achievements here in packing in these millions of bits of information which, on the disc, will allow it to produce color television over a period of 30 minutes. That's a long play record, you see, and they even hope to extend it to 45. Well, this is the sort of thing it is in practice, and I've seen it. I've seen this working. I was privileged to go over to Eindhoven and see this working, and there it is, and there's the sort of picture you get, and I can assure you it really is marvelous. Now, I'm most indebted to Mr. Kees Nyssen, who has come over from Eindhoven, and this is the first time that one of these discs has been entrusted out of the laboratory. Hello, Kees, how nice of you to come. Look, may I very gently hold it? First of all, you see what a beautiful looking thing it is. It's a plastic disc that's metallized, and the laser beam is reflected from the undersurface of it. Now, can any of you guess why it has these beautiful colors? Yes?
Well,
What would you say?
well, because you see, it's very, very like the film of oil that was over the water. It had this interference property.
Very, very good indeed. Yes, it is indeed. Those grooves are so close together that we're getting interference patterns, we're getting cancellation of some of the light frequencies, and there's that very beautiful color. Well, we can't play it here, but Mr. Nyssen, thank you very much indeed for bringing it over. We do feel greatly privileged. Thank you. And now I am really hopping about, aren't I? Are any of you good at seeing in the dark? Good people seeing in the dark? Do you think you can see in the pitch dark? I don't think you can. Let's have a look. We've got here a low light camera. Now, this is a recent development again. Again, it's in the research stage, but you see it's quite a small camera. This time it's not color, but it's going to look at a picture which you'll see first of all at reasonable lighting level, and then we're going to reduce the lighting, and I want you to tell me when you can't see the picture, and we'll see if the camera can. So here's the camera, and I'll get over here, and we'll start dimming the lights and have a look at the picture. Can you recognize the picture? You can see a picture there. It's a sort of a model, isn't it? Right? You can see it quite well. Fine. Now let's start dimming the lights. You can see the picture very well now, but it's beginning to fade. Tell me when you can't see it. You can't see anything. You can't see it? Well, well, I'm sure you can't see very much, can you, there? Well, now, let's have a look at, let's see if an ordinary camera can see that picture. Now, an ordinary camera is doing its best at the minute, and there's nothing there. But we're now going to put on the low light camera, and if you look up at these monitors, we'll see what the low light camera can do. And just to show you, there's no trick here. Yes, there's the picture. I'm going to put in this card. Now you can see me waving my arm, and there it is. That camera is actually being able to see things which we can't. Two of you come up and just stand one either side of me, and let's see if it can see us. You will see us dimly. There is a little light here. Most of the light's coming from the monitors. Now, getting close together, there we are. You can see us. I think you can recognize us. Thank you very much, boys. There we are. So there we have this remarkable thing that we've actually got a camera that can do better than the human eye in seeing in the dark. This sort of thing doesn't very often happen, does it? Now, I'm coming round the front to explain to you that I'm going to talk about a different method of transmission. I'd like to be able to say that we'd made a new discovery and you didn't have to use electromagnetic waves, we discovered something else. But I can't. I'm not talking about that, but I'm talking about the way in which we send the message, the way in which we modulate the carrier. And this is a different method, and by the time this device arrives, I'll be able to demonstrate it to you. Let me start by telling you that it would be very useful, wouldn't it? Do you remember we started off, all we did was to switch a signal on and off. It was sending simple Morse messages, wasn't it? And then we were sort of quite pleased with ourselves that we were able to get microphones and cameras to follow the variations of the signal and produce complicated waveforms. Well, now we're going backwards in a sort of a way, but I'm first of all going to play a bit of a numbers game with you. If we lower the lights, I think you'll be able to see that these things, figures here, are illuminated, and if we count the naught, there are 8 of them. They happen to be 8 figures, but they could be 8 letters or 8 anything else. Now, supposing that you have thought of one of these numbers, I don't know what it is, and I'm going to ask you, is it this one? And no, is it this one? And so forth and so on. It's just possible, you see, that I would have to ask you 8 questions, because it may be the very last one I've decided to guess. So instead now, I'm going to get one of you, who will do, you do it. I'm going to ask you to put up your hand and just hold out the number of fingers of a number between 0 and 7, somewhere in between there. And I don't know, everyone else will know, but I'm going to hide over here, you see. Hold up your hand. Now, has everyone else seen that number? You've all seen it? Is he holding up his fingers? Good. Now, all you know what it is. Put your hand down. I'm the only one in the room that doesn't. I don't know what number it was you held up. I'm going to now find out by asking 3 questions, not 8. What I'm going to say is, cut it off there. That's the top half, that's the bottom half. Was it in the bottom half? You answer. Was it in the bottom half? Yes. It was. Right. 0 is no, 1 is yes, so 1, it was in the bottom half. That's got rid of all those 4. Now start on this 4, hand in the middle. Was it in the bottom half? No. No. So I have to put a 0 there because 0 is no. That brings it down to 2. Was it in the bottom half? No. No. So it's a 0 there. So the number was 4 he thought of. And do you know what this is? Binary. Absolutely right. You see, this is telling us that that's there with the number of 1s, there aren't any, the number of 2s, and there's 1, 4, so the number's 4. And had you chosen 5 just to do it, it would have been there, and it would have been 1, 0, 1, and there it is pointing to 5. So that shows us that the smallest number of questions that we can ask to find 1 out of a number of things is given by the number of digits in the binary representation. It just happens that way. There were 8 things, 2 to the power of 3 is 8, and we had to ask 3 questions. How many questions do you think we would have had to have asked had there been a million things? Do you think we could have got through it by the time of the end of the lecture? Yeah. You do? Any idea of the number of questions?
20.
20. Huh, marvellous. You see, this is the thing. We would only have to ask 20 questions to sort out one of a million things. So, what does this mean? It means that if we're prepared to send out pulses, and suppose that we have one of 1,000 possibilities, and I leave room for just 10 pulses is enough to describe one of 1,000 things. I leave room for 10 pulses. I can have yes, no, yes, yes, no, whatever it is, read them off at the receiving end. All I've done is switch on and off my signal, and I have read something to an accuracy of 1 part in 1,000, 1 out of 1,000 possibilities. Now I'm going to just hold up this card, and you'll probably be able to, I don't think I'll bother to draw it this time. I think we can go on without it. This is the smooth waveform that we've been transmitting with our electric signals. The first thing we've got to do is to say, well, let's not use it smooth, let's have it sampled. Now, if we're prepared, think of a television picture. If we're prepared to take a sample at each little picture point in the picture, that's all we want to know. How big is each little picture element? How bright is it? That's quite enough to give us all the information that we were previously sending out as this smooth curve. So in this case, you see, there they are. If it happened to be a sound waveform and the highest note we wanted to hear was, I'll turn it around to that camera, that's right, was 15 kilohertz, it turns out that if you think of one cycle going positive and negative, all you've got to do is sample 30,000 times a second and you don't lose any information at all. So that means we now have to merely send information of the height of the pulse. And we've just seen that if we wanted to do this as accurately as to be never more in error than 0.1%, 1 in 1,000, we would only have to send 10 pulses. Well, in this case, I've just had 8 levels like we did on the demonstration piece, and you see we're sending 3 pulses, and there's the binary number 111 is 7, and there's 0, 1, 0, and you see that's 2 as it should be, and so forth and so on. So those binary numbers are the numbers that we would, the pulse sequences that we would send out to send out a complete waveform, just switching the circuit on and off. And this does mean to say that we can send very much more reliably, because it's much easier to just say whether a signal is there or not than have to follow all the intricacies of a waveform. In the first case, we have to adjust everything to be exactly right. In the second case, we can use these little transistors and just switch them on and off and do high-speed switching. If we were doing that with a television signal, we'd be sending 100 megabits, as we call it, a second. Each one of those little pulses we call a bit. So there is some new method of transmission, and I'm now going to let you listen to this, first of all on the sound tape. We'll just have a little bit of this. This is undistorted as it would normally be virtually. It'll repeat the sequence 3 times. That, in fact, was 12 bits, 2 to the power of 12 levels. I'm talking through it. We can't have that one. Next sequence. You can begin to hear distortion, a bit of hiss. And finally, we'll just hear it once more, and this time it's only going to have what I said, 8 bits. That's quite obviously distorted. And you hear that background hiss. When I said 8 bits, it never seems to stop there. When I said 8 bits, That's 2 to the power of 8, 256 different levels. So for sound, we really need about 4,000 levels to describe sound accurately. What about television? Well, here's a shot of the audience, and I'm going to ask them to take a close-up of somebody because it shows up very well on a close-up. Perhaps the cameraman will be good enough. Here we go. Just at the moment, I have got what we were calling just now 8 bits. 2 to the power of 8 is 256 levels, and that virtually is a perfect picture. It doesn't know it's being broken up or quantized. But I'm going to now switch off. I'll do 2 at a time. I'll bring it down to 6. Sorry, that way round. That's 6, and you won't see much change there. I'll do it even more drastically still. And now I'm down to only 8 levels, and you can see very clearly these flat areas where the waveformers had to decide, you see. It couldn't follow the variations. It had to say, well, I've just got to choose, and you've got all these sort of flat areas. If you just move your head from side to side or turn it sort of like that, you can see these flat patches on the cheek. I've purposely exaggerated that, but we're only 8 levels now. The eye is more tolerant than the ear to this sort of distortion. So I will just throw some of these switches back again. That's 16 levels, 32 levels, and very quickly it's becoming quite a reasonable picture again. But we do need something like 256 if we're really going to be sure of everything. So that is quantized waveforms. And now on to a completely different subject again. As you see, I said I'm hopping from one thing to another. There's no continuity in this. But I'm going to move over now to displays. What we all would like, what you keep reading, would be a nice thing if it were around the corner, is a nice big flat screen that you could have on your wall and view your television on that. We haven't got it yet, but it's beginning to look a possibility because some of the developments in making tiny little gas discharge devices that will glow, and they can in turn produce little ultraviolet light which can light up phosphors, and there's another one I'll come to. I mentioned the light-emitting diodes, but first of all the gas discharge tubes. Now somebody knows how to use this machine. That's right. Your name is? You've used this machine before. You noticed when we came in it just said vision of the future. All these tiny little gas discharge tubes are writing out that message on a little sort of matrix of dots. Would you clear that? And we can play a little game on this. What he's going to do is run this tape reader, and it's going to put up a question. Just stand back. Can everybody see that? Yes, there we are. Now there's a question. Read it out aloud, I will. Early swords were made of bronze, true or false? Now what do you think it is, true or false? True. Well, you type true then and see what happens. And it says correct. He got the right answer. Well, we could go on playing with that machine. Thank you very much indeed. We could go on playing with that machine, but it's got more questions, but we haven't time because I still want to show you more things. Let me just come over quickly. This, by the way, is a little device. This is one of the light-emitting diode devices, and if I switch that on and the camera comes right in, you can just see a little dot there, where it's a little matrix of dots, and as I turn this, it moves it around, and as I turn that, it moves it around, and I think if I turn that one to all, it'll turn into a line, and I can move the line across. Now, I mentioned that the light-emitting diode isn't a gas discharge device. It is a little solid-state thing, just like a transistor. But when you put a signal through it, it actually lights up. Now I'm coming to another form of display altogether that doesn't emit light. But you know when you take a cooking fat, for example, or paraffin wax that makes candles, if you heat it, it becomes clear, doesn't it? But if you let it cool, it becomes opaque. Now, the reason for this is that when it's clear, the crystal structure is such that the light can pass right through it, but when it's cool, the crystals are all muddled up and they're scattering the light and you can't see through it. Well, now there are some special liquids, and I'll hold in my hand this little bottle here, you see, it's just a liquid. I just merely show you that to show you that it really is a liquid. And some of this liquid is trapped between these two plates of glass. Now, it's special glass insofar that there is a metallized coating, it's conductive on one side, it's conductive on this side, and it's conductive on this side. So we've made the sandwich with the liquid crystal material in between. And when I apply a voltage to it, I think you will see we'll get rather a dramatic change. Now, I'll apply, it's already applied to that terminal. I will now apply it to the other one, and I've got to do this. Yes, I've got a reflection there. Have I done that properly? That's applied there. I didn't quite get to change myself then. I'll look at it myself first to make there. Right. I wasn't making good contact. You see, get it away from reflection. And it's not coming off very well. I got it myself a moment ago. Perhaps if I do it this way around, it'll be better. I think the difficulty really is getting a camera. Now, I'll take it away, put it on. Can you see it go cloudy? Let me try it there. All right, there. Now you can see it quite clearly. It goes cloudy. That took a little time because we had it. I'm going to show you that change through a microscope because it's much more exciting if we have a look and see what's actually happening to the little molecules of the crystals. Now you see that. Do you see there's a regular pattern there? That's with no voltage applied. And now I'm going to ask him to apply the voltage, and you will see the pattern go into a little, look at that, that's random movement of these little dots. That's scattering the light. We'll take the voltage away again, and it gradually forms itself back into a crystal. That's really happening now on one of those plates. Look at this nice device that can be made out of it. You see this clock? I'll just bring it round. Can you see? Now, you see that clock? It's not set up to tell the right time, but I'll just make the hands move quickly by pressing the buttons, and now you'll see the figures change. Do you see that? Isn't that pretty? It's a display, you see, which is not emitting light, but it's altering the light reflected from it. What a lot of possibilities there are there. Fine. Well, now this brings us to a rather exciting thing. What we're going to do is to send a message out into empty space, and if all goes well, you're going to hear it come back from having traveled an effective distance, a total distance, having traveled a total distance of 250,000 miles. It's going to come back here just as if it had been right out to the moon, and in fact it's going to be reflected from a satellite like this. Now I expect you've seen this sort of thing before. These horns here at the top are the actual receiver and transmitter horns. These things are picking up signals which stabilize it and keep it in exactly the right position, and all these are the solar batteries, the solar cells, which energize the thing. And I'm going to ask Mr. Coates just to, he's doing it, you see. This is the model of the Goon Hilly receiving station that will be receiving our message if it all works. Now, what I want you to do is, we'll have to do this all together because we're going to get an echo. I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, but I won't say it out loud because we don't want my voice, I want your voices to come over, so I'll do it, I'll mime it, you see, like a conductor, I'll say, and then I want you to shout out, hello, all together. Very, very, all together, right? Let's do that once more, shall we? That was rather exciting, wasn't it? 1, 2, 3. You hear that? I'm just going to do one myself, and to hear my own voice come back by itself, I'm going to say, good luck. Good luck. Now, did you hear that bouncing backwards and forwards? The remarkable thing is that this satellite was only picking up a tiny little fraction, you see, of that energy, and the rest of it was going on and on out into outer space. I wonder if there was anyone listening. I wonder if there was anyone who heard our messages being sent out, rippling through the ether. I think that's a very exciting thing, and that was really happening, and I think we're very indebted to the Post Office for allowing us to show you that demonstration. Well, that brings me to the last of our demonstrations in this series of lectures. You may be interested to know that in the course of the 6 lectures, we have given very nearly 150 demonstrations. Now, some of them only amounted to bursting a balloon, and some of them amounted to a great world hookup using satellites, like the one you heard just now. But can you imagine, I've been doing the talking, but behind the scenes there are a very large number of people that have done an enormous amount of work to make all this possible. And I do really want to thank the members of the research departments of industry, the Post Office, and indeed the universities for all they've done to make these lectures possible. Let's just give them a cheer, shall we? The ones behind the scenes that have helped us. 1, 2, 3, hooray. Hip hip. And then there's a special welcome, a special thanks, I should say, to Mr. Coates here and his staff of the Royal Institution. They've done a tremendous amount of work. And then there are my own colleagues. There's Mr. Ian Gibbs there on the end, Mr. John Ingleton, and they have practically worked night and day to let me get through all these demonstrations. So thanks to them too. Well, I haven't quite come to the end. I just want to leave you all with just a thought. You see, we've been talking about scientific discoveries, haven't we? And we've seen how, by observation, men have taken us from just noticing that some little effect happens like the deflection of a compass needle, and it's led us all the way along the road until we've managed to get sound and television pictures back from the moon. And all these have been discoveries. Now, I can see by a lot of your faces, and I know by a lot of the questions you've asked, that some of you are going into science yourselves. You're going to make science a career. And you may find, you know, you're living in a very exciting world. I think it's more exciting than it's ever been before. But as you know, it's got its problems too. And you may find people perhaps will try to discourage you at times and say, well, you know, we'd be better off without all this science. It's the science that's done the damage, you see. But nothing could be further from the truth, I believe. You see, science is, what it sets out to do is to discover the truth, to understand the universe. Now, we, of all God's creatures, have been given brains that are capable of understanding. Think of Maxwell. Think of Maxwell with a pencil and paper predicting electromagnetic waves. Even the most intelligent animals like dolphins couldn't do this, could they? So, what I want you to realize, it isn't the discovering that does it, it's the way we use it. So you have to be careful when you find the new pieces to put them together carefully, because it's going at a rate that the problem is keeping up with the rate of technology, so use these things carefully. The difference between understanding and knowledge is a big one. Let me explain it to you this way. If I pick this up, you all know if I let go, it's going to fall. Nobody understands why. Thank you. Don't you ask him.